Today is October 18th, 2017. My name is Kate Dolansky, and I have here with me Mr. Robert Dumbrys. We are here in the office of Congressman Jim Renacci in the Parma office to conduct a Veterans History Project interview. Bob, if you wouldn't mind starting, where and when were you born?
I was born in Kretinga, Lithuania, during the Second World War, August 30th, 1944, and lived in a refugee camp in Germany for 6 years prior to coming to the United States. And I had some experiences, you know, in the refugee camp, and one of which was GIs coming in and giving us gum and candy and stuff like that. So I think I had a predisposition for wanting to be a soldier ever since I was a little boy, psychologically. And then in the refugee camp, we had a kind of a man-drawn fire station and fire engine, and one of the big things was red German helmets. They painted them red, German World War II helmets, and they used those for the firemen. And one of the big things was, as a little boy, to get a hold of a helmet, and you have it painted red and have it be your own helmet in the fire station. And so one day, I was probably about 4 years old, I went out and we used to explore the area, and it's not like now where the kids can't go out. We used to go out everywhere. You know, as little kids, 4-year-old kids, we used to wander everywhere. And this is a bombed out camp, and it was in Memmingen, Germany. And it was a bombed out German Air Force base, but it wasn't totally destroyed because they were developing jet engines, jet planes there. So the Allies wanted the technology, so they didn't totally destroy the base. So it had some barracks that were still working or still standing, and we lived in a one-room apartment in the barracks. There was 5 of us. Wow. But anyway, so one day I went out wandering around and I found a German World War II helmet on a cross. And I didn't realize it was a cross or anything. I just found a helmet. Right. And I brought it back to my mother and I said, you know, I want to get this painted red. It's my helmet. And she said, well, where did you find it? So I took her out to the grave site where I found it. And she said, well, you got to put it back. You can't keep it. And I was really, really irritated. Aww. I had to put the helmet back, my own helmet, but I had to put it back and you know, put it back on the grave. And then she explained to me that it was a grave and so forth. But we used to find ammo on a regular basis that was unexploded, and we used to take rocks and throw rocks on the ammo to make them explode until some of the kids got hurt. And then, you know, the adults all told us, when you find anything, you know, bring it to the adults. And, you know, so we started bringing it to the adults to defuse it. But and the other big thing was not having food. And we used to get Red Cross packages, but my mom said that what we got was toothpaste and toothbrushes and no food. Oh my gosh. And so the thing that we desperately needed was food, and not toothpastes and toothbrushes. So she said she could probably start a store selling those from how many toothpastes and toothbrushes we got. But the big thing we needed was food. And then we came to the United States. We had a choice of going. We were sponsored. You had to be sponsored. You couldn't just come over on your own. You had to be sponsored. And we came to the United States in about 1952. We had a choice of going to Australia, England, or the U.S., and we decided to go to the United States. And then we went to New York, came into harbor. And I remember coming into New York. It was nighttime, and I was on a ship. It was a troop carrier. The USS Hahn was the name of the ship, or General Hahn. And coming into New York, I saw these eyes, like, you know, just, you know, snaking through the road. They looked like eyes, and one right after the other, and so forth. I asked my mother, what is that? And she said those are the eyes of snakes, or rats, I mean, the eyes of rats. And what they were headlights of cars. So I said, I'm not getting off this ship, you know, I'm staying on the ship. I'm not going to the land where there's rats running around. And then she explained to me that she was only kidding. It was actually cars, so we got off the ship, and I fell asleep, and I don't remember anything else. I don't remember anything other than waking up in Boston, you know, sometime later. Lived on a farm in Boston for a while, and then moved to Cleveland for work. You know, the DPs at that time, they're called DPs. Everybody referred to us as that. And in fact, in Cleveland, you know, there were people who used to yell at us, "You dumb DP, go back where you came from." It stood for displayed person. And we used to, you know, my brothers and I would yell back, well, where'd you come from? You know, you're an
Yeah.
American Indian, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there was prejudice towards DPs at that time, and we used to tell people what DP stood for was displaced, delayed pilgrim.
Oh, I
So it
like
was
that.
actually delayed pilgrim instead of displaced person. So people would. So my dad came here for work. He worked at Eaton Corporation for 35 years in the factory, and that was the history of coming to Cleveland.
And how old were you when you came to Cleveland?
I was probably about 10 years old.
Okay, so you started school
9,
here.
10 years old. I started school. Actually, I started school in Boston in first grade. But I was very apprehensive as a young child, though. I was very, I wouldn't say shy. I was more
Cautious?
very cautious. Yeah, that's a good word. Very cautious, because I had incidents of things happened to me in a refugee camp that weren't good. And, so it made me very cautious of people. And one incident I remember was on a ship coming over. I had a little toy truck that I was playing with, and the guy came over and said, "Do you like that?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, let me make it better." And he crushed it. He smashed it with his foot. He said, "There, I made it better for you." So I said, "Well, thanks a lot." So I was very apprehensive and very cautious with people, and so when I first went to school, I was a crybaby. They couldn't stop me from crying, in the first grade, and then finally I got over it. And probably took me till middle school to get open, to become an open person, because I was very shy in grade school and so forth. Didn't speak English real well, so I spoke Lithuanian. I still speak Lithuanian and English, and then my brother spoke, the same thing, and then the first words he learned was "shut up." So all the kids in Boston would say things to him, and he'd say "shut up." So they started bringing him gifts to get him to stop saying "shut up." So of course he said it more. He was no fool. He started saying it more.
And you said you had two brothers?
I had two brothers, yeah, two older brothers. All three of us were in the service at the same time.
Okay.
My other brother, there's 2 years difference between us. My one brother lives in Rocky River. My other brother lives in Michiana Shores outside of Chicago. And I joined the Army. My middle brother, Gediminas, or Giddy, referred to him, was drafted. And my oldest brother, Ray, was going to Case, Western Reserve University at that time, and he graduated from college, and they told him they were going to draft him. And he said, "I've got two brothers in the Army, I'm not going in the Army." So he joined the Navy, and he became a Navy diver. And he worked as an officer. He went to officer school as a Navy diving officer for 4 years. And then he got out 4.5, 5 years, and then he got out. So there was an interval of time, which was about maybe 8 months to a year, that all three of us were in the service at the same time.
Wow.
And that just drove our parents crazy, because this is during the Vietnam War, and they had seen war, from being refugees. They had seen war and the disasters that it brings about. So,
Right.
They were very, very nervous for us.
Absolutely.
Very nervous. In fact, they used to get calls from people. A little side note, that people would call them on the phone. And in those days, you had no internet or anything like that, so the only way you communicated was by mail. And people would call them and say, "This is the Department of Navy calling. We want to let you know your son Raymond was killed in Vietnam." And or this
awful.
is or this is your son. This is the Department of Army calling, and we want to let you know that your son Robert was killed in Korea.
That's so
So it
sad.
had to be somebody my dad knew or my mom knew, because they knew where we were, and I'm sure my parents bragged about us,
Yeah.
being in the service and so forth.
Yeah.
So, that was our patriotic duty. So all three of us were in at the same time.
Absolutely. So how old were you when you joined?
I joined when I was 19.
So right out of high school then?
1 year out of high school. I went to Fenn College. Fenn College became Cleveland State University. And 1965, 66, it became Cleveland State. I was in college in 64. I graduated January 1963 from Shaw High School.
Okay.
And I went to college, to Fenn College, studying business, but I didn't do so well. I was a C student, C+ student in high school, and I was surprised that I got into college, but they accepted me. And after a year of college, I got a letter from the school saying they didn't want me to come back. And so I said, what am I going to do? So I decided to join the Army.
Okay.
And of course, everybody around me, my brothers included, were all trying to talk me out of it. My girlfriend, everybody was talking me out of it, but I was bound and determined to go into service. And, you know, so I joined the service, and January 7th, 1964 was indoctrinated, took the oath of office, or whatever you want to call it, and went into service. And but kind of a little bit of a story. I got thrown out of college for lack of good grades in 1964. I got out of the service in 1967. I applied for Kent State. My brother was going to Kent at that time. He got out of the Army before I did. He was going to Kent, so I decided to try to apply for Kent State, go to school with him. And that's one thing that the Army taught me was determination and discipline and reaching objectives. And my objective was to go to college. No matter what, I wanted to go to college. I didn't want to work for a living yet. I got a job when I got out of the service working in a shipping and receiving clerk. Actually, I'm working on a dock, you know, shipping and receiving materials into the warehouse. And I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, so I decided I wanted to go to college. And I applied for Kent State, and he wrote me back a letter saying that because my grades were so low at Fenn College that they didn't want me.
No.
So I said, you know, this can't be. I can't let this go. So I wrote a hand page. There was no word processor, so I wrote a hand page letter about 7 pages long to the dean of business at Kent State, telling him why he should accept me. You know, stuff like, you know, I'm mature enough to be in the service. I can die for my country, but I'm not mature enough to go to college, according to you. And you know, you'll be taking people that you know are going to flunk out, but you won't take me. And he called me up and said, come on out to Kent and talk to him. So I came out, and he accepted me.
Wow.
That's
And he
great.
said, you know, we'll take a chance on you. So at the end of my freshman year, I got a letter from Kent State saying that we didn't want you to come back because my grades were too low. And so I went to the dean and I begged my way, please, please, please accept me back. You know, I'm taking hard courses. I'm not taking easy courses. I didn't drop any course. Please accept me back. So he accepted me back. And then at that time, I started the rugby team. Myself and a guy by the name of David McKee started the rugby team at Kent State, and I was the captain of the rugby team. And you know, brag a little bit, I was a very good player. I weighed 250. I weigh 210 now, but I weighed 250. I was real fast, very strong. You know, it's kind of a bull on the rugby field. And so at the end of my sophomore year, I got another letter from Kent State saying, this time we're not kidding, we really don't want you to come back. So I said, you know, this is not good. This is not good. So I went to the coach of the rugby team, who was the head of the economics department, and I told him about it, and he said, well, we got to have you play rugby. So this is the jock in me. He got me back in. And so at the end of my junior year, I didn't get the letter. At the end of my senior year, I didn't get the letter. So I graduated with an overall 2.0 average, and I then had a 2.5 in my major. So I made it with just the skin of my teeth, you know,
Wow.
just exactly what you needed, the bare minimum, but I graduated.
Yep.
That's
But
great.
then I started working for a living and realized I didn't learn anything in school, so I went back to Cleveland State, and I took every accounting course that Cleveland State had to offer at night, and during the summer, accelerated courses. And I'd be up till midnight, 1 in the morning, doing accounting problems, and then, you know, go to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and raising a family. And I did that for about 4 years. I took every accounting course they had to offer at night, and then I decided if I'm going to go, and I got 3.0, so I'm doing better. And then I decided if I'm going to do that, I'm going to try to go to graduate school. And so I applied for Baldwin Wallace, and you had to have 5 years of work experience to go to Baldwin Wallace graduate school. And you had to have letters of recommendation from different people, and they accepted me. So I ended up going for my master's in business at Baldwin Wallace University now, and I ended up with a 4.0. So I went from getting thrown out of college 3 times and not accepted once to getting a 4.0 in graduate school. So I thought that was a pretty good accomplishment.
I would say, yeah.
So,
That was great.
and the Army had a lot to do with that because it kept me, you know, goal-oriented, and being a veteran, you know, I had a lot of fun in college. I can't put it any other way. As a veteran, I had a lot of fun. I was alive. I'm a veteran. I'm thinking, what can they do to me? They can't send me to Vietnam. They can't draft me again. You know, and I had people coming up to me saying, you know, I got a low draft number. I'm going to get drafted. And I just kind of shrug my shoulders and say, well, I'm sorry about that. You know, but,
Yeah.
you know, that's the way it goes. You know, it's kind of like I have mixed emotions about the volunteer army, and that is that, you know, I feel sorry for the guys and the gals that are in the service that go to Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth, and I have real sympathy for them, and I wish them the best of equipment, the best of training, and keep them out of harm's way. But in the same token, I also, deep down inside, kind of feel, don't bitch about it because you volunteered. So like when I was in Korea, people would, you know, I'd start bitching about Korea, and I did that a lot, by the way. Guys would say to me, how'd you get here, Dumbrys? And I go, or what's your serial number? Because RA stood for regular army, meant that you joined, US was a draftee. So mine was RA 1571882. And US, like I say, meant you were a draftee. So they say, what's your serial number? And I go, RA. They go, what is that, Dumbrys? They go, RA. So you asked for this, pardon the way I put it, but they go, you asked for this shit. And I said, well, I didn't exactly ask for this. I did ask for it, but I didn't exactly ask for this. And they said, well, you can't bitch because you asked for it. And so I have that same kind of feeling that, you know, people that are in the reserve, stuff like that, that get called up, you know, hey, you asked for it. You know, that's what you're in the service for, is to fight and, you know, go do what your country asks you to do, and, you know, and take the good along with the bad. So, anyway, so I joined the Army, and that was to run away, basically, because I had nothing at home, and I used it as an escape mechanism.
And why the Army?
It was 3 years. The Marines were 4 years, the Navy was 4 years, so I wanted to get in the Coast Guard, but you couldn't. Everybody was trying to get in the Coast Guard to avoid Vietnam, and everybody was trying to get in the reserves to avoid Vietnam. So you had to know somebody to get in the reserves. You had to know a congressman or a senator or somebody, you know, in the reserves in order to get in the reserves. So I ended up in the Army because it was 3 years. And I think I also just wanted the Army. And I just wanted the Army. Again, I think it's based on seeing soldiers when I was a young boy. And so I joined the Army. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. The recruiting sergeant was very nice. You know, just a really nice guy. And I figured, well, the Army's going to be, you know, pretty decent. Until I got to Fort Knox, Kentucky. And when I got to Fort Knox, Kentucky, you know, the first thing they started yelling when you get off the bus is, get off the bus quicker, faster. Everything's faster in the Army. Do everything faster. You're not doing it right. Do it again. Do it again. Straighten that line out. You know, do it again. You're not doing it fast enough. Do it again. It's over and over and over. So they started yelling at us right away, and I said, you know, the recruiting sergeant wasn't like this. You know, this is not the way, you know, this isn't the Army, you know. This is, so, you know, they 3 days in the indoctrination center, where they basically got you a haircut, gave you your uniforms. You got 3 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of underwear, 3 pairs of shorts, your uniform, and some other, you know, fatigues and stuff like that, and your dress uniform. And then after 3 days of indoctrination, you got your shots, stuff like that. You know, the cadre of the basic training company would come over and they'd yell, you know, call out your name, and you would fall out in formation, and they would then march you over to the basic training area. And the first sergeant, which is the top sergeant in the company, the first sergeant is this, it was F-10-3, was the company that I was in, 3rd Brigade, Company F, 10th Battalion, 3rd Brigade, Training Brigade. And we had us all lined up, and he said, okay, you know, you guys are in the Army now. He said, I want you to all bend over and look at your asses. So we all, you know, bent over and looked at us, because he goes, from now on, it's mine. So I said, uh-oh, you know, this, I don't think I care for this part either. So then Sergeant Ford, I was put in the 1st platoon. Sergeant Ford was the sergeant, my training instructor, my drill instructor. He was a bit of a sadist. And on the way to the basic training platoon area, or the barracks, he would tell us to get closer. He made us run, and we're carrying little duffel bags and stuff. And he's making us run, and he's telling us, get closer, get closer, get closer. So you're literally on top of each other trying to run, holding this duffel bag and the little AWOL bag, that they called.
Yeah.
You know, trying to run, and, you know, kind of laughing, because I thought it was kind of funny, actually. And then he's, you know, what are you guys laughing at? You know, this isn't funny, you know, this is, but he was a bit of a sadist, and we had a guy that was, I don't know if you ever saw Full Metal Jacket.
I haven't.
The movie Full Metal Jacket. Well, the basic training for me was like basic in Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, it was pretty rough and pretty a little sadistic, and you know, because they have to break you down and then rebuild you, is what they used to say. You got to unteach you everything your mommy taught you, and teach you the military way. So we had one guy in our platoon we called Stumble Bump, because he couldn't do anything right. No matter what he did it wrong. Right shoulder arm, he put his rifle on his left shoulder. You know, left face, he'd go right. No matter what he did it wrong. So he was called Stumble Bump. So one day we found formation. We had these old wooden barracks, the Second World War barracks. They had the first floor and second floor, and a latrine on the first floor, and concrete or asphalt driveway in front of the company. You couldn't walk anywhere. You had to run everywhere in basic. You couldn't walk in the company area whatsoever. No matter where you went, you had to run. So anyway, so we fall off for formation one morning, and he said to Stumble Bum, he said, "Did you shave?" And he said, "Yes, you know, Sergeant, I did." He says, "Oh, I don't think you did. Go get your razor." So he gets his razor. In those days, you had the double-sided razors, you know, not like you have nowadays. So he took his razor and he scraped it on the asphalt, and he gave it to him, and he said, "Shave." And the guy started going back into the barracks to shave, and he said, "No, shave right here, right now, in front of everybody." So he started shaving with his broken razor, started ripping the skin off his face. And the platoon sergeant, you know, Sergeant Ford, after a while, he said, "Okay, that's enough, go get yourself cleaned up." So he did, and he was bleeding on his face, on one side only. You know, he stopped him after he did one side. And the next morning, though, there was 40 guys in front of that mirror.
Shaving.
Shaving. You know, we got the message.
It was clear.
It was clear. It was 40 guys shaving that morning.
Yikes.
But basic for me was actually pretty interesting. I didn't have a car till I was 18 years old as a kid. So everywhere I went, I walked or I took the bus. In Shaw High School, I went to Shaw, and it was 2 miles away, uphill both ways. And so, you know, no matter what the weather conditions I went, so I was in really good shape. And the basic training was not that, you know, physically it was demanding, and emotionally it was very demanding, and I was tired. I don't want to make it sound like I wasn't. I was fatigued, I was tired, I could sleep at a drop of a hat. And but the only thing that kept me going was that you know, Sergeant Ford would have to march with us when we went marching places. So I said, if he can do it, I can do it. Of course, he didn't carry a rifle in full pack, combat gear, but we had. But I said, if he can do it, I can do it. And I became the platoon guide, which is the acting platoon sergeant. I don't know if you ever heard that term or not, but in basic training, they have squad leaders. You have 4 squads to a platoon. You have usually about 10 men in a squad, so you have about 40 men in a platoon.
Okay.
So there's recruits that are picked out to be squad leaders. And then there are one recruit that's picked out to be the platoon guide, they call him. He was acting sergeant. So whenever the sergeant wasn't there, in the evenings or off hours or whatever, then the recruit that was a platoon guide or acting sergeant became the sergeant. So Sergeant Ford elected a couple of guys as platoon guide, and he would then remove them and put somebody else in that spot. So he asked me one day if I wanted to be in that spot, because I was a good soldier, and I said no, you know, because I was afraid he's going to remove you, and once he removed you, he harassed you more. And so I figured, you know, I don't want to be harassed any more than I'm being harassed. But I made it. I was a platoon guy for about 6 weeks, and you know, I had extra privileges as a result. I had my own room in the barracks, where everybody else had to sleep in the bay, and you know, and then had to go to, you know, I got an opportunity to go to the PX when everybody else didn't. Drank beer, of course, and then you know, so it was just interesting. So I was a good soldier, and physically the things were interesting to me. They weren't scary. Like a lot of guys, like Stumblebum, when we went to the grenade throw, I remember he, you know, you sat behind a ditch, so you weren't watching the other guys. Like on the rifle ranges, you couldn't see anybody else. But you hear the loudspeakers, and you hear the loudspeakers going, you know, "Good throw, soldier," or something like that. And then you heard the loudspeaker, "Who is that man? Get him the hell off this range."
Oh.
We knew it was Stumblebum.
Oh.
They pulled him off the range before he hurt somebody, the grenade throwing range. And so, anyway, so we went, we did a lot of dismounted drill in basic, which is marching in formation and rifle drills and so forth. In fact, we did more of that than we did on the firing range, which I found kind of ironic that, I'm going to be an infantryman, technically, and then I'm spending less time on the firing range. I'm spending more time learning how to salute than I was learning how to fire a rifle. Even though you spend a lot of time learning how to take it apart and put it back together, you could do it blindfolded. I was just surprised how much little time we spent on the rifle range itself.
Wow.
Most of the time was spent, dismounted drill and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So anyway, I joined the Army to become a personnel specialist. And the Army made me a personnel specialist. I went to advanced individual training school after basic, and I went for personnel specialist. So basically it's typing and clerk, and boring as hell.
Yeah.
Just boring as hell. And then meanwhile, you had to pull KP. KP was either punishment, or when it came your turn, you had to pull KP. And KP in the Army was from 3 o'clock in the morning to about 9 o'clock at night. And the Army mess hall is the cleanest mess hall you've ever seen. At the end of every meal, they hosed down the mess hall floor, not the dining room, but the kitchen area, and poured soap on it, and with a broom you washed it after every meal.
Wow.
So it was incredibly clean.
Wow.
But the problem was it was very long.
Wow.
In basic training in the mess hall, you had to seat, 4 guys had to sit down and eat at the same time. You didn't eat until you were given the command to eat. And then when the 4 guys sat down, you started eating. And they walked around yelling, "Put it in your mouth and chew it outside. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Put it in your mouth and chew it outside." So you're eating, you ate your meal and you were constantly hungry. So you ate your meal in about 30 seconds, and then you ran back to your company area, your platoon. Put it in your mouth, chew it outside. And but before you went in the mess hall, you had to go through the horizontal ladders. And so you had to go through the exercises before you went into the mess hall itself. And the guys that were a little out of shape were in trouble because they had to, they couldn't get through the horizontal ladders, and they would have to do it 10 times before they finally let them go inside the mess hall and eat.
Oh no.
But I was always hungry. I was always hungry. You couldn't get any food from home. If you got food from home, you had to give it to the sergeant, and he basically either divvied it up with everybody in the platoon or threw it away. And you couldn't go to the PX, so you couldn't get any food other than what was fed to you. And it wasn't enough as far as I'm concerned. It was enough to keep you alive, but that was about it. I was always hungry in basic. But I went from basic to AIT, which also stood for Advanced Infantry Training. But in my case, I was a personnel specialist, so I basically did records and learned how to type. And then after, that was at Fort Knox, Kentucky. That lasted about 2 or 3 months. At that time, my brother got drafted. He got sent to Fort Knox, and he was in basic. So I went to visit him in his company in basic, and I wasn't afraid of the sergeants anymore. Since I was out of basic, and there was more in the Army, the regular Army. And I went to see my brother, and his platoon sergeant came around and said, "Get the hell out of here, recruit." And I said, "I'm not a recruit, I'm a soldier now, and I don't need to get out of here. I'm talking to my brother." And then I figured, what, I better get out of here because he's going to harass the hell out of my brother.
Oh, yeah.
So I decided to leave. So I left, and that was the last time I saw my brother for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I didn't see him again for another 2 years, and
Wow.
I didn't see my oldest brother for about 3 years.
Wow.
Since he was in the Navy, he joined the Navy, like I say, a Navy diver.
Right.
Didn't see him for about 3 years. So after AIT, we had everybody went to, there was a bar called the Halfway House, which is halfway between Louisville and Fort Knox. And it was filled with soldiers, not wearing uniforms, but civilian clothing, and girls, of course. And that's why you went there. You went there for the booze and the socialize. And so a bunch of us, we got in the car, and we were being shipped out 2 days later, and this was a Saturday, and it was Sunday the next morning, and we went to the Halfway House, and we got pretty loaded. And coming back, there was a little town, I don't remember the name of it, but it was a speed trap for soldiers coming back from the Halfway House. So they pulled us over, and they basically gave us tickets for being intoxicated, and they gave the driver of the car a ticket for being drunk driving, and they gave me one for public intoxication.
Oh no.
So we had to go to court the next day, which was Sunday. And so we went to court, and there was a woman judge. It was a small little town, little mayor's judge, or mayor's court, and she said, "How do you plead?" And she said, I said, "Not guilty." She said, "If you plead not guilty, if you plead guilty, it's $90 or so many days in jail, working it off $2 a day." So I said, "Not guilty." She said, "If you plead not guilty and you're found guilty, then it's 180 days in jail and a $300 fine." So I said, "Guilty." And then I had to get the money from somewhere because I didn't have $90. I was only making $80 a month, and I didn't have $90, so I had my dad wire me $90 to get me out of jail. They put us in this cell. It was a cage, basically. There were four of us until the money came, and then they let us go. So that was my first experience with the law.
Wow.
My first experience with the law was interesting. It was a radar trap, even to this day. I think it was Radcliffe, Kentucky.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, so the next day I got my orders to go to Fort Hood. I went to the service club before that, and I saw in the enlisted man's club all these patches of all the different units. And I was kind of gung-ho. I was young, I was excited. I believed in the FTA, which stood for Fun, Travel, and Adventure, the Army, but pardon the way I put it, but we later changed that to fuck the Army. So anyway, it's Fun, Travel, and Adventure, and I believe in that. And I was looking at all these different patches of all these different units and all that. And one of them was the 2nd Infantry Division, which is a 2nd Armored Division, which is a triangle, and every patch underneath basically had some saying, and it said "Hell on Wheels." And I said, "That's pretty neat. I'd really like to go there." And next thing I know, I find my orders going to the 2nd Armored Division in Fort Hood, Texas, Hell on Wheels. And so I ended up in Fort Hood, Texas. Ended up in the 502nd Admin Company in Fort Hood, and basically it was a clerk. And life was easy then. Life became good, other than Texas was hot. And every weekend, my buddy and I, there'd be about 3 or 4 of us that hung out together. So about 2 of us out of that 4 or 5, we would hitchhike somewhere in Texas. In those days, you could hitchhike. So we hitchhiked all over Texas. Went to Austin, went to Waco, went to Dallas, went all over Texas, just every weekend. And then the other guys wouldn't go anywhere. And they'd be bitching about how bad Texas was, and we'd come back on a Sunday night after being gone for the weekend. After, you work till noon on Saturdays, and after that you're off duty, so you're free to go where you wanted to go. So we'd come back on Sunday night, my buddy and I, and we'd have a ball in Waco. Just no money, but we'd have a ball anyway. And we'd say to these guys, they're bitching about Texas, and we go, "What'd you do this weekend?" "Well, nothing. I sat in the barracks." "Well, no wonder you're bitching. Get out and do something." So some of these guys would actually start wanting to hang around with me because, every weekend I'd go somewhere. So near the end of the month when I was broke, you got paid once a month in the Army. And when I was broke, I would walk around the barracks and say, "Anybody want to buy a friend? Just cost you a couple bucks, you can go out drinking with me. I'll be your friend until payday, and then when I pay you back, I'm not your friend anymore." But anyway, we were friends. But some of the guys started wanting to hang around with myself and my buddies because we went somewhere. We did something, we didn't just sit around the barracks all day and mope about it. Yeah, we, so went down to Mexico a couple of times, and that was an interesting story. Mexico was, we went to Veracruz, which is across the border from Del Rio, Texas. Went down there on 4th of July, and in the village in Veracruz, they had a section they called Boys Town. And Boys Town is where you went to kind of go wild and crazy. And it was wild and crazy. It was wild and crazy. It was dirt roads. The police officers just had civilian clothing with a revolver stuck in their belt, so you know it was a cop. And the other guys that had been there before said, whatever you do, don't go wandering off by yourself. Make sure you have somebody with you. And anything you wanted, you could get there. Literally anything. They had the people would walk around with these little plaques, and cigars, cigarettes, and they'd have everything you wanted on there: switchblades, beer, anything at all that you wanted. And I swore that if you wanted the Empire State Building, they'd bring it to you. But it was fun, and we went to a bullfight, and basically the bull doesn't have a chance. It's a slaughter of a bull. But I won't get into that. But, went to bullfight. We were cheering for the bull. So the Mexicans were all looking at us.
Oh.
And we go, El Toro, yeah, El Toro, when he got the best of the Matador.
Oh.
But the Mexicans were all, bitching at us for saying that. But, so we went everywhere, and then about 8 months into Fort Hood, and I worked in an office, and it was basically a wooden office. I worked in an office, and about 8 months into Fort Hood, I was 6'4", and I weighed about 200 pounds. They took me and they said, we're gonna make you a machine gunner. And they took me out and trained me on an M60 machine gun. Myself and 2 other guys. You had 3 guys assigned to each gun. You had a machine gunner, assistant machine gunner, and an ammo bearer. So, I'm on the firing range learning how to fire an M60 machine gun, and I'm thinking to myself, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
I thought it was fun, actually. Firing a machine gun, I kind of figured it was a little bit of fun, but I'm trying to decide, I'm a personnel specialist. Why are they doing this? And then my military occupation specialty, MOS, was a personnel specialist, but then they made me a secondary heavy weapons infantryman. And so I'm thinking, why are they making me a heavy weapons infantryman? Well, I learned later when I went to Korea, they didn't need personnel specialists in Korea, they needed infantrymen. But anyway, so I found myself becoming a secondary MOS of the heavy weapons infantryman, and then 2 months after that, I got orders to ship out of Fort Hood to go to Oakland, California, destination unknown. Just go to Oakland, California. I had to be there in 5 days, so I left to go home on leave, and then flew out to Oakland. And when I got out there, it was about 5,000 GIs all total that they put on a ship. I don't remember the name of the ship, but it was a big ship. It was a troop carrier. A room this size, they probably slept 50 people in it. And that's not exaggerating. It was that many people. And they had 5,000 GIs on the ship. And I found myself going to the Far East. And we all thought we were going to Vietnam for sure. And they put you on a ship in alphabetical order. So I had, in Fort Hood, I had a buddy called Richard Jabosinski, and Jabosinski is spelled D-Z-Y-B. So it started with D and Dumbrys and another friend named Duke. And so the 3 of us were in line together, and we got on this ship, and they said to Duke and Jabosinski, well, we should take the top bunk. And the bunks were basically metal frames, and they were one up against the other like this, so you slept head to toe. And they had so many people on the ship, you didn't get a pillow, you got a life preserver as a pillow. And that was it. They had no pillows, there was too many people on the ship. And so I said to Duke and Jabosinski, let's get the top rack. And they said, why? I said, well, if people start getting seasick, you don't want to be on the bottom rack.
Oh, that's so
because they're going to be laying over this bunk, puking down on you. And so we got the top racks. We got the very top rack. And first 2 days out, 3 days out, it was pretty rough. I remember going under the San Francisco Bridge, the Bay Bridge, and his ship was filled with GIs on deck, and the guy was standing on the bridge with his girlfriend or a girl, and he had a V, making a V, and he pointing to the girl and waving goodbye to us. And of course everybody's yelling at him, draft dodger and all kinds of other stuff, we're going. So the first 3 days out, everybody got seasick. And it was a sight to behold. 5,000 GIs seasick. I didn't get seasick. But they had the compartments closed down so you couldn't go up on the deck.
Oh my gosh.
So it started, Duke was next to me, and in the galley, in the mess hall, you stood at a long table. It was the width of the beam of the ship, and you stood from one guy across from the other guy. So you had another guy across from you, and the guy next to you, and another guy next to you, and you had metal trays. And you had a cup of coffee stood in the porthole. So I was saying to Duke, look at the ship, it's rocking. And the ship would rock, and all you'd see is water. So the whole side of the ship was underwater. And then it'd rock back up, and you'd see air. And I'd go, Duke, look at that, nothing but air, nothing but water, nothing but air. And Duke's going, shut up, Dumbrys. Shut up, Dumbrys.
No.
So then we're looking at the coffee cup, and you could see the coffee cup, the angle of the coffee inside the cup, changing. And I say, Duke, look at that, man. That's how much we're listing. The ship is rolling, and he'd shut up, Dumbrys, shut up, Dumbrys. Then the other thing is, it was funny the first time because you let the trays go. So as the boat would rock one way, the trays would come by. and the boat would rock the other way, the trays would come back. And then you just keep on eating, you know, the tray come back. So the guy just, you know, let it go on purpose. Now, the guy two over, you can't see what he's doing because you got a guy next to you, so you can't see the guy two over. So as the trays come by, Duke got sick. So he started heaving on all these trays as they're coming by. So as the trays come back to the rightful owner, they're got other food on it.
Oh my gosh.
So they start throwing up.
Oh
And pretty
my.
soon everybody in the mess hall is throwing up.
Gosh.
And Duke started the whole thing. He started the whole process of 5,000 GIs getting seasick.
Oh my gosh.
And it was, you know, they had drains in the compartments. And as you know, they got on the ship, I was wondering, what do they have these drains for? And I found out, you know, after seasick for 3 days, everybody settled down. Duke didn't. He was still sick. He was laying next to me, head to toe, and he kept throwing up in a towel. And he had nothing left to throw up, but he was sicker than a dog. And after the 3 days, though, they just took fire hoses and just fire hosed everything down.
Ew.
And just cleaned out, you know, and it was fine. After that, it was fine for the next 20-something days to go across the Pacific. It was fine. But the first 3 days out were kind of rough.
Oh man.
So then we ended up in Sasebo, Japan, for a day, just stopped in Japan, and then beautiful, you know, it's just beautiful island as you're coming into Japan. It was just beautiful. This was in April of 1965, and then we took off again. The ship left, and the next morning I got up on deck. If you weren't the first, there were so many troops that if you weren't the first one up on deck, you had nowhere to sit. You stood for 8-10 hours because you couldn't stay in the compartments. You had to leave the compartments. You couldn't stay below deck. You had to go up on deck. And to lean up against something like a bulkhead or something like that was like a real privilege, you know, to get up on deck and actually have something to lean up against. So I come up on deck, and it's in the morning the next day, and I'm kind of like, what's that odor? What's that smell? You know, and the sergeant standing next to me said, that's Korea. So
Oh my
10
gosh.
miles offshore, you could smell the country. You know, the kimchi and stuff like that.
Oh my
You could literally smell the country 10 miles offshore.
Wow.
So then we went over the side and went on landing craft, and then went on the Incheon, and went on landing craft to Incheon, Korea, and you know, had our bags and stuff, and then went on a train, and then by bus went through Seoul, went on a train through Seoul, and then they told us, whatever you do, don't stick your arm out the window or don't hold anything out the window, because they call them slicky boys. They would rob you, they'd try to steal you, whatever they could, they'd get their hands on, whatever they could get their hands on, they would. And Korea was dirt poor in those days. This is back in '65, it was dirt poor. The average Korean probably made $20 a year, if that much. It was just dirt poor.
Wow.
Your katachogi was what they told us to tell me, that meant get out of here. You know, somebody came up to you, you know, and the windows were open on the train, katachogi, get out of here, get out of here. And on the ship, they processed you, and they gave me a blue tag. And I said, what's this for? And the blue meant infantry. The red meant artillery, and yellow was cavalry. And they gave me this blue tag, which meant I was going to the 7th Infantry Division. And I said, you know, wait a minute, you guys made a mistake. You know, I'm a clerk. And they said, well, you know, you're also an infantryman. So welcome to the world of infantry. And I said, I'm a clerk, though. You guys don't understand.
Oh, no.
I joined to be a clerk, and they said, did you get clerk training? Did you get personnel specialist training? And I said, yes, I did. He said, well, we fulfilled our obligation. You know, now you're going to be something else. So I ended up in the 7th Infantry Division. We took a train for a while, and then we took a truck, military truck, and went up these dirt roads. And the only roads they had in Korea in those days were called MSRs, military service roads. They're the only paved roads that went into the countryside. And they're just 2-lane roads. And we went up, and we ended up at Camp Casey, and the village outside was called Tangdushan. And we owned at the processing center at Camp Casey for a day or 2 days while you got processed to your company. And the next morning, you know, I'm waking up with the rest of the guys in the processing center in the barracks, and they made us get outside and take our shirts off. And I'm saying, you know, what do we got to take my shirt off for? But anyway, what happened was apparently somebody had snuck into the village the night before, and got in an argument with one of the Mamasans or whatever and burned half the village down. But the lady supposedly scratched them. So they were looking for somebody with scratches on it.
Oh.
And I said, well, you know, welcome to Korea.
Wow.
And it was hot. It was May time frame. It was hot. And the hills were just barren hills, nothing but hills. And then I got put into the 7th administrative company. I was a clerk. And so by God, even though I was a machine gunner, I was a clerk. And I went to the 7th admin company, and I don't remember what platoon, but it was Kwanzaa huts. They were basically like a beer can halfway buried in the ground. So we lived in these Kwanzaa huts. There was 10 guys in it, about 8 to 10 guys in a Kwanzaa hut. And they had pot-belly stoves on one end and the other end. In the summertime, Korea was really hot, really hot. In the wintertime, it got really cold. It got 27 below zero. And
Wow.
the worst part about Korea was when I walked into the Kwanzaa hut and I'm listening to these guys talking to each other, and they're ready to kill each other. And I'm thinking, you know, these guys are going to get in a fight. Well, they're best of buddies. Just, you know, the way they talked. You know, every other word was a swear word. And, you don't know this, you don't know that, you know, blah, blah, blah. And after about 3 months, I found myself being the same way. You know, swearing like crazy. And, you know, you seem angry, but you're not really angry. But every morning we had to do what's called police the area. And that's the go out and, you know, formation, and then after formation, we had the first sergeant that was carried a baseball bat. Everywhere he went, he carried a baseball bat. And he said that's to hit the, protect myself with. And everybody hated him, the first sergeant. And he used to call us goddamn prima damn donnas. You goddamn prima damn donnas. And every morning, then in the mornings he'd say, we got 3 guys in the stockade, and they're getting ready to get out, so I need 3 replacements. So you goddamn prima damn donnas better watch yourself, because I'm looking for 3 people to replace these guys coming out of the stockade.
Oh my gosh.
So we'd have formation every morning, and then he had alerts where you had full combat gear, you know, you'd fall out in formation alerts at 4 o'clock in the morning and stuff like this, and then go out to your, you know, your designated combat area. But one day, around the orderly room was a beer can also. They had flowers. He had planted some flowers around the orderly room. And apparently, there was an 11 o'clock curfew in Korea. Everything stopped at 11 o'clock at night, so you had to be back on the compound. There was a village right outside the compound, and you had to be back in at 11 o'clock at night. And one day, we had a formation at 4 o'clock in the morning, an alert. And so we fall out with our combat gear, and again, being a machine gun, I carried a machine gun, an M60, so I'm, you know, falling out in formation, and the first sergeant comes out, it's cold, and he comes out and he says, some goddamn big-footed, goddamn prima damn donna stepped on a poor innocent flower. Apparently somebody stepped on the flowers in front of the orderly room to get back at him. They crushed the flowers. So, you know, any goddamn big-footed, goddamn prima damn donna would step on a poor innocent flower would rape his grandmother.
Oh no.
You know, this is what we're called out for at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning in formation in cold weather because somebody stepped on a flower. And then he said, you know, if I find out who it is, your ass is mine. And then he did an interrogation, you know, as far as looking at the logs, who went out on pass that night, and who was in the village, who came in, what time they came in, stuff like that. But he never found them. But goddamn prima damn donnas. Never forget that. But Korea, there's a little different side of Korea. The village was dirt road and it had huts on both sides. And as soon as you went outside, they had an MP gate. And to get outside the MP gate, you had to have them, you show them your pass and your ID card. And you got outside into the village itself. And as soon as you got into the village, there was music blaring. You know, they were playing the rock and roll music, and then the kids would be lined up wanting, you know, food or anything they could get out of you. And everything you carried in your top 2 pockets. You didn't carry them in your bottom pockets because they would steal it from you, try to steal it from you. The slicky boys. In fact, when you rode in a truck, you had to have somebody sit in the back of the truck with a bayonet basically, because they would run behind the truck and they'd jump on the truck, or they'd try to reach in the truck and grab whatever's inside the truck and throw it out to another slicky boy running behind the truck.
Wow.
So you'd hit the fingers with a bayonet, you know, as they're trying to grab hold of the truck. And so you always had a guy in the back of the truck. Anyway, so you come in and there was the kids, and you want to help the kids, you know, like I used to bring some candy bars and stuff like that, and everything was rationed too. Coffee was rationed, cigarettes were rationed, you had a ration card, you could only buy so many packs a month, and only buy one can of coffee a month and stuff like that, because the guys would sneak them into the village to the girlfriends. And the village, there's a little negative side of the village, but it's the reality of life. It was filled with prostitutes, and that's it. And the side of the village that the GIs went into. It was just filled with, and there was basically, you know, I don't know if you guys want me to get into this or not.
Whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Okay, if you feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But there was three types. There was the streetwalker, the steady girl, and then the bar girl. And the only place you could go into to drink or anything at all, it had on limits to UN personnel, it had a sign. If it didn't have that sign, you couldn't go into it. You couldn't eat anything. We had no civilian clothing, so it was all military clothing. You had to wear your fatigues, whatever, into the village at night. And the village closed at 11 o'clock. You had to be back in, like I said, 11 o'clock at night. And all you did basically was sit and drink. You went in, they had two types of beers. You couldn't drink any water, couldn't drink any Coke, nothing in the village. You couldn't eat or drink anything whatsoever.
Wow.
The only thing you could drink was OB beer, which stood for Oriental Brewery Company, and Crown beer. And so you go in the village and it'd be filled with GIs, you know, sitting at the bars drinking this one or two beers, and the girls huddling around, you know, huddling around. And then you could get a steady girl for about, you know, $15 a month, and she'd be your girlfriend for the month. And
Oh my gosh.
some guys did that instead of you know, participating in the other activities. And then, I don't want to call them whores, because these girls were actually paying for their families.
Wow.
You know, if you started talking to them, because you got to know them over a period of a year, you got to see the same ones over and over, same girls in the bars, you got to know them and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
they were supporting their families.
Wow.
They're dirt poor farmers, had no other way to make a living, and you know, you actually kind of respected them for, you know, even though this is the profession that they were in. It was not. It was really that or die.
Yeah.
You know, basically.
Yep.
And but the village was interesting. The village was interesting. Like I said, you could only go into what was labeled UN personnel. Couldn't go into anything else. Had no overnight passes. We had 2 or 3 times I got passes to go to Seoul, and which was a 3-day pass. And Seoul was 35 miles south of us from where I was. I was almost as far north in South Korea as you could go before you hit the DMZ. And it was cold, it was hilly. In fact, you could see somebody on a hill 10 miles away. You could see a dot walking on a hill.
Wow.
And it stunk.
Wow.
It stunk. You know, they had honey buckets, they called them, which was the outhouses, you know, taking everything out of the outhouse and putting it on the field. They called it honey buckets. And anything Korean we called katusa. So the soldiers, the Korean soldiers, would be assigned to the American Army. We call them katusas. So anything Korean was called katusa. But we'd go into the village, you know, get drunk in a skunk, and then come back. And then in the morning you had formation, and every formation, you know, you had the platoons broke up in the company area, and you had they called it assholes and elbows, part of the way I put it. But basically, you walked like this.
Oh my gosh.
The sergeants would walk behind you yelling, "All I want to see is assholes and elbows," and you picked up any little piece of litter that was in the company area, and you did that every day. Even when it was 2 feet of snow on the ground, you know, you still did that.
Oh my gosh.
Assholes and elbows.
That was funny.
And so we did that every morning, and then you went off to your designated duty hours, the duty place. And sometimes I would go and fill in for infantry company as a filler. And I went to the 1st and the 50th Infantry. And I don't remember the compound, but it was a small compound. It was out, a small village outside the compound. And I'd go up there as an infantryman, and go on alert and patrols. And the worst part was the way the guys talked to each other. Again, Full Metal Jacket, if you saw that, or Platoon. I'm switching movies now. Platoon. That's the way they talk to each other, like they talk in Platoon. But you go up to, you go into the villages, and people would start crowding you, particularly when they saw that you were new, because they knew the old timers and the new guys. They would immediately start coming up to you, hey GI, give me this, hey GI, give me that, and they'd begging. The little boys, little kids would come running up to you and wanting things, and then if you gave them something, then all the hordes of kids would come out.
Yeah.
So the best thing was not to give anybody anything.
Yeah.
And then some of the guys would have their watches literally stolen off their wrist, when they're driving a truck. They'd stick their hand out and the watch would be stolen off the wrist while they're driving the truck with the hand out for the hand signal.
Wow.
It was an interesting place.
Yeah.
My first day there, the road was elevated, then you had the compound, you had barbed wire fence, the compound, you had concertina wire, which is round wire, and you had the barbed wire fence, you had guard towers, and then you had guards walking the fence and guards in the guard towers. And my first day there, they took me out on the rifle range, and they taught me to fire a shotgun and a 45, which I knew how to fire already, but they had to qualify on a shotgun and a 45, because guard duty was a shotgun. You carried shotguns, and then in the guard towers you carried M14s, and then inside the compound itself you carried 45s. So you had to qualify on all of them, in order to be put on guard duty. And we had guard duty every other night. So every third night you were on guard duty, and I hated that. I hated guard duty. But the first night on guard duty, I was there about 2 days. You couldn't go in the village for the first 2 weeks. You were quarantined from the village because they wanted you to get used to the area before you got a pass to go into the village. And I'm walking guard along the fence, a little gross again, but I'm walking guard along the fence and looking at the people walking on the military service road. The village is on the other side, and I'm just fascinated by the way the people looked and the dress, and watching them walk by. And this little old lady comes walking off the road, and she's going like this to me, hi GI, hi GI. And I'm wondering, what is she doing? Because they said don't let anybody, approach the fence. If they approach the fence, don't interact with them. Like some guys would actually, exchange money by going through the fence, exchange beer, they do stuff. Don't interact with them. And to make a long story short, she squatted down and did her business right across the fence from me. And I said, welcome to Korea.
Oh my goodness.
So this is, and the whole time she's, smiling at me, yeah, GI. And so,
oh my gosh.
We pulled guard duty every third day, and guard duty was 2 hours on, 4 hours off. But you had duty hours during the day. In other words, you didn't get the day off because you had guard duty. And I hated guard duty. Every guard mount, you had a guard mount where inspection of the guards before you went on guard duty, and then you got your assignment. There was a hill in Korea. At that time, the Koreans were buried on mounds on the side of hills, and there would be a mound, so you knew there was a Korean buried there. Wow! And they had one hill we called Katusa Hill, which basically halfway up the hill was the barbed wire fence. And it had a wire that ran along the fence that you held on to, so you wouldn't slip off the hill as you walked guard duty along the side of the hill. Wow. And it was a Katusa Hill because it was a graveyard. Wow. And we had guys that literally refused to go guard duty on it. That when they got Katusa Hill, they refused to take it because they were so superstitious about the graveyard and stuff like that. They refused to take it. Wow. They absolutely refused to go on guard. They would do everything to switch guard posts, with somebody else, so they didn't have to walk Katusa Hill. And in the wintertime, it got real slippery, and you'd be walking along, and you slip down the hill, and then you have to get back up. And
oh my gosh!
And that's why they had the wire fence, not a barbed wire, but a wire cable running along the side that you could hold on to. And then in the winter it got really cold, 25 below, 27 below zero, and it got so cold that you'd walk 1 hour on, 2 hours off.
Wow.
Instead of walking your normal 2 and 4, you'd walk 1 and 2, because you couldn't take it for more than an hour.
So how long were you there?
I was there for a year.
Okay.
I was there for a year.
You saw every season?
Yep, every season. And then in July and August, and it started raining. And after about 3 or 4 days, there was a creek that ran along the side of the compound that ran into the village, and the people would come, they would wash their clothes in the creek on the other side of the fence. And, they basically wash their clothes on stones. They didn't have dishwashers or anything like that. They'd be beating their clothes on stones, and you see some of the girls and guys would be, washing their hair, taking a bath in the river, and other people would be washing their clothes, and other people would be doing something else in the river right next to them. And so it was not necessarily the cleanest place. That's why you couldn't eat anything or drink anything.
Right.
We had a houseboy. Everybody had a houseboy, and we had KPs. So you paid $5 a month for a houseboy. My houseboy's name was Kim, and basically he made your bunk for you and shined your shoes and cleaned your clothes. But he couldn't touch a weapon. Couldn't touch any weapons, bayonet or a weapon or anything like that. But he kept everything clean for you. So he was the richest guy in Korea.
Yeah.
Because he made $5 a month, and then every guy would tip him. He'd probably he'd take care of about 4 guys in the barracks.
Wow.
And the guys you'd tip him another $5 a month. So he was making $10 a month, and that was considered extremely good money.
Yeah.
Extremely good money. And then the KPs were making another $5 a month. They took right out of your pay for the KP, so you'd have to full KP. But I remember when I first got to my company, I got a metal tray and I'm going for breakfast. Now, when I was in Fort Hood, Texas, they served eggs any way you wanted them. So you'd say, sunny side up, and they give you sunny side up eggs, scrambled eggs, or whatever. So, bacon, and I got spoiled with that. So I'm sticking my tray out, and there's a sign that says, eggs your choice. And so I said, sunny side up, and I heard this plop. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, what the hell is this? It was scrambled eggs, powdered eggs thrown on my tray. Yeah. And I said, hey, I'm sorry, I asked for sunny side up. Plop, move on, soldier, move on, soldier. So then I said, the mess sergeant came along and said, what's the matter, soldier? And I said, I want sunny side up, and I'm getting this slop put on my tray instead. And I said, there's a sign up there that says, eggs your choice. He goes, well, you don't understand. Your choice means eat them or don't eat them. That's what your choice means. Said, I got the program, Sergeant. You don't have to tell me anything more. I got the program. But it was great not to have to pull KP. But periodically on guard duty, the Koreans, you had the guard, the fence was lit up with floodlights on our side, but the other side was not. And so it was pitch dark on the other side of the fence. And periodically you'd have people yelling, GI, you die, GI, you die. And periodically you'd have a bullet come whizzing by too. So while you're walking on guard duty, it'd come whizzing by, and you don't know where it came from or anything.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the worst part of Korea, was the guard duty. And in patrols, we also went out on patrols, but went out in the field and so forth. 20 below zero, you're out in the field for 3 or 4 days. It's not comfortable. And then from Fort Knox, I got my orders, or from Camp Casey, Korea, I got my orders to go to Fort Knox. And I was being sent to an infantry company in Fort Knox that was regular cadre. In other words, it was a training center, but it was also had regular army. Okay. And I was being sent to an infantry company on my orders. And the guys that I had at Fort Hood, what they did was basically, because Vietnam was kicking up, Fort Hood became a training center. Instead of the 1st and 2nd Armored Division, they moved everybody out. Okay. And they made Fort Hood another training center like Fort Knox. And the other guys that I was with, and the personnel specialist, the clerk, moved. They went to Fort Knox. I went to Korea. Some went to Vietnam. And when they saw my name coming on the orders coming back to Fort Knox, they had me reassigned from the infantry company to this admin company. And that was great. That was great, because I had sucked duty. I mean, it was really easy duty. No reveille in the morning,
Yeah.
you know, and stuff like that. It was really easy duty. When I was at Fort Hood one day, one of the best days I had in my life was New Year's Eve in Dallas, Texas.
Really?
Yeah, it was great. Myself and about 4 or 5 other guys decided to go to Dallas on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And I had a black suit. And I didn't wear a tie, but I had a black suit. And come around 10:30 at night on New Year's Eve, I decided to go out. You know, we went out into the street in downtown Dallas. And downtown Dallas was nothing like it is now. It was small and, you know, kind of like Cleveland. And you go out into the street, and everybody's in the streets. And everybody's kissing each other, drinking out of each other's bottles. You know, you get in the car, you go about a block in the car, you're kissing the girls, they're kissing you, they're giving you drinks, and you're drinking in the, you know, in the cars. And you get out of one car, you get in another car, you're kissing somebody else. And it was a ball. I mean, I was just having a ball. As a young guy, 19 years old, I was having a ball. And you had to be 21 to drink in Texas, by the way. And the county that Fort Hood was on was a dry county. You couldn't buy anything to drink off of Fort Hood.
Wow.
In Killeen, Texas. It was strictly dry. You could only buy Coke and water and coffee. And so that's why we went, you know, we had to go to Temple, Texas, which was 35 miles away to get a beer. So anyway, so we went to Dallas, and I'm outside on the streets, and I'm kissing all the girls, and I'm drinking all the, you know, all the booze. And the only thing you could buy in a beer in Texas in those days, the only thing you could buy at a bar in Texas in those days was beer. You couldn't buy hard liquor. It was not like you see in the Wild West. You come and get a shot, you know, which is what I expected. I expected, you know, the doors would be flinging open, and see the dance girls, the guys playing poker, and, you know, give me a shot, you know. And none of that stuff. It was just beer, which was kind of disappointing. And you had to be 21 too, and I was disappointing with that too. So anyway, so I'm in downtown Dallas on New Year's Eve, and I'm kissing all the girls, and they're kissing me, and you know, I got to admit, I was kind of a good-looking guy. You know, I think at the age of 19, I wasn't looking like I am now. I was a little handsomer, had hair, and about 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting in the back seat of a car, and I feel, you know, I have my arms around 2 girls in the back seat of the car, and there's 2 guys in the front seat of the car, and I feel some poking in my rib, and somebody says, "Who's that?" And I'm like, I don't know, who's that? It's me, you know. And they're going, "Who are you?" And I said, "I don't know. You know, how'd you get here?" I got in the car. Well, it turned out that I got in the car and they were going home. They were about 20 miles outside of Dallas in farmland. It was farm country outside of Dallas.
Oh, no.
They were 20 miles outside of Dallas, and they realized they had me in the back seat.
Oh,
and
no.
they didn't know that for the 20 miles. And I'm drunker than a skunk. And the one guy says, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm a soldier from Fort Hood, you know, and I'm drunk, you know, I'm sorry from Fort Hood, you know."
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, there's Fort Hood over there in the distance." And I saw these lights out in the distance. And so they threw me out of the car.
Oh.
And I'm walking towards these lights thinking I'm actually walking towards Fort Hood, because, you know, again, we walked everywhere. And I remember, you know, I was used to walking back to Fort Hood from the village or from the town. And I'm walking, and I walked into a barbed wire fence, and I tried to walk through it.
Ow.
So I got cut up, my hands got cut up, my suit got cut up, and I'm walking through this fence, and I passed out on the fence. And so I'm laying on this fence, on this barbed wire fence like this, you know, cut up, and I'm laying on it. In the morning, a couple kids drove by in a car. They saw me laying on the fence, so they came over, they pulled me off the fence.
Ouch.
And they said, you know, "Who are you?" And I said, "You know, I'm a soldier from Fort Hood." "How'd you get here?" "I don't know. Somebody threw me out of a car, you know. I just got here, you know. And where am I? I had no idea where I was. I had no idea what was going on or anything. And they said, "Well, for $20, we'll take you back to Dallas."
Oh my God.
And so I gave them $20. They drove me back to Dallas, and I found the hotel that I was staying at. I didn't remember the name of the hotel or anything, but I found it. And I went up into the room that the other guys were in, and, you know, cut up, and then, you know, I walked in, and they're going, "What the hell happened to you?" I had a ball. I had a ball. I just said, "I just had a ball." I had a ball. That was a great night. And in my mind, that was a great night. So, and then you know, I took my suit off and I threw it in a waste paper basket. It was in the room, and a maid came in, and she said, you know, Latino maid, and she said, "Are you throwing this out?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can I have that?"
Wow.
And I said, "It's ripped up." She said, "That's okay, I'll sew it up." And so she took my suit.
Wow.
But that was one of the best nights I had in Texas. It was a ball. It was a ball, even though the barbed wire and all that was
That's like
still
a movie. Yeah.
Hilarious.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
and then, so I got reassigned to Fort Knox from Korea. I went back to Fort Knox. And in Korea, like I said, we did patrols too. And I'd set up the machine gun on defensive perimeter and stuff like that, and the infantry guys would move away from me. And I'd kind of wonder, why are they moving away from me at first? You know,
Mm-hmm.
I realized one of the first guys to get killed is the machine gunner, because you're putting out more firepower
Yeah.
than anybody else. If you actually get into combat,
Yep.
you know, the first guys that go after is the machine gunners, the guys putting out the most firepower.
Right.
And so, and then we used to set up ambushes, and it was like an L, you know, shaped. There was machine guns on the bottom of the L, and the riflemen on the L, and the mortars behind that. And
Mm-hmm.
other ones were V-shaped.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so I get back to Fort Knox, and I'm an E4 corporal at that time, and I got promoted to sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pretty proud of myself. 2.5 years in the Army, I got promoted to sergeant.
Yeah.
And I had a platoon sergeant, and I became a platoon sergeant, because my platoon sergeant got shipped to Korea, so they asked, the company commander asked him who they want to be the platoon sergeant. There's 40 guys in the platoon.
Uh-huh.
So when I got promoted to sergeant, I ended up with a room instead of sleeping out in the bay.
Yeah.
I ended up sleeping in a room with another E5.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy was an alcoholic, you know. So
no.
he was in the Army for 20-something years, and he only made E5. We getting run out of time?
Nope. Good
So,
call.
anyway,
good.
so I'd wake up in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he'd be drinking. And come Christmas time, I remember, you know, saying to him, "Are you going home for Christmas?" And, you know, I tried to talk him into going home. He hadn't seen his family. And he said, "Yeah, he's going to try it." So he leaves, and he comes back. He couldn't get on a bus. He was, you know, so hardcore alcoholic.
Wow.
He couldn't make it on the bus. He had to come back and get a drink.
Wow.
And he never went, you know, he never did go home. But anyway, so I slept in a room with another guy, and then when I became platoon sergeant, I got my own room.
Mm.
And I got an actual bed, a
Wow.
regular bed with a wooden frame,
Wow.
and I didn't get inspected,
Wow.
which was great. They had no inspections, you know,
That's
in my room. They
exciting.
inspected the bay every morning.
Yeah.
They inspected the other rooms every morning, but the platoon sergeant, they did inspect, so I didn't make my bunk. You know, I let it be a little
Wow.
sloppy and stuff
Right.
like that, and that was great. Life was great. And I basically used to tell the guys, the new guys that would come into the platoon, I'd say to them, you know, "Welcome to the platoon, you know, second platoon, you know, you're gonna work till you drop, then you're gonna get up and you're gonna work some more." And they don't go, so yeah, you're gonna work till you drop, and then you're gonna get up and you're gonna work some more. And then before inspection, I'd say, "We're gonna have an inspection, we're gonna check and recheck it. And when we're done checking it, we're gonna check it again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just make sure everything's right." That was the Army way.
Mm-hmm.
And one day we had an inspection. I had about 2 months left in the Army, and we had an inspection, and I didn't care anymore about anything. I got 2 months left. All I want to do is stay out of trouble,
Yeah.
so that I won't get extended or get, you know, stockade or an Article 15 or anything. You know, because any time you served that was bad time, they added on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got, you know, 3 months in stockade, you didn't have 3 months military duty. You had 3 more months after you got out.
Right. Right.
So, you know, I didn't want to, you know, get in any trouble, you know, so I was
Right.
really kind of behaving myself. But I was kind of cocky and a little arrogant. You know, here I am, a sergeant, you know, and I had this young officer that came in to do an inspection in the platoon, and the guys knew me in the platoon, so they knew I wasn't real serious, but I had a great platoon. In fact, a lot of the other NCOs that had the platoon sergeants in the company bitched to the company commander because I was the only E5 that was a platoon sergeant. And they wanted it to be an E6, E7 and above. And the company commander kept me as a platoon sergeant because I had a really good platoon. You know, they did everything that was required of them, and you know, inspection time, everything was neat. So anyway, so this young officer from OCS comes in as a guest officer. He's going to inspect the platoon. And so, you know, he comes up to one guy, he doesn't say anything. "Where are you from, soldier?" You know, "I'm from New York." Comes up to another guy, "Where are you from?" "I'm from Chicago." You know, and comes up to another guy, he looks at me, and he looks at the guy, he says, "Sergeant, this man looks like he needs a haircut." And I get right in the guy's face. I'd be like 3 inches away from his face, yelling and screaming at him, "You goddamn son of a bitch, I told you to get a haircut. You're embarrassing me in front of the lieutenant," you know. And you're never going to leave this platoon again, you're never going to get a pass, you know. And the guy's trying to keep from laughing because he knows I'm not serious. But I'm 3 inches away from his face, literally spitting at him, you know, you goddamn son of a bitch, you know, you're gonna. So then, you know, the officer looks at me and he says, you know, he doesn't want to say anything to anybody else, you know, he's like wondering, this guy's going to go crazy, the sergeant. So, you know, he goes about 5 or 6 more, he doesn't say anything, and he comes up to another guy and his shoes need shining. So he said, you know, this, you know, sergeant, this man's boots need, I think they need shining. So I'm, again, 3 inches away from his face, yelling and screaming, you know, shine your boots, you're going to shine every boot in the company, you're going to shine every shoes in the company, you're never going to get a pass until everything's spick and span, and stuff like that, just screaming at the guy. And the officer doesn't say anything else to anybody else. And then we went into latrines. Latrines, you had the bays at the end, and you had hallways, you had a latrine in the middle. Spotless. The military latrine is just spotless. You could eat off the floor.
Wow.
So I took a hunk of peanut butter and I put it on a toilet sheet. And we go into the latrine, and the officer's inspecting the latrine. Everything's clean, everything's spotless. And he looks over at me and he sees the peanut butter sitting on the toilet seat. And he goes, "What's that?" I went, "Tastes like shit, sir." He goes, "What?" I said, "Tastes like shit, sir." And he goes, and he almost had a heart attack. He just turned around and walked out, and I never saw him again. But I thought that was pretty cool.
That is hilarious.
We used to pull stunts like that, you know, and just try to get at the officers. And then I got discharged, and then before I got discharged, they gave me, yeah, it tastes like shit, sir. You want some? So I got my discharge. You don't get discharged after 3 years. You get released from active duty. Your commitment is 6 years, and yeah, his commitment is 6 years all told. Now it might even be 7 or 8. I don't know, but so for the 3 years in active duty as a volunteer, then you have 3 years inactive reserves. So that meant I didn't have to go to meetings or anything. Where my brother had 2 years active duty as a draftee, then 2 years active reserves. He had to go to summer camp and he had to go to meetings, and then 2 years inactive reserves. So I got before I got out, you know, the officer basically tries to talk you into staying. And they show you a movie about this guy that gets out and he goes home to his little town, he can't find a job, and everybody hates him, you know, as a Vietnam veteran, and you know, and everybody's calling him names, and he can't find a job, and out of despair, he decides to go back and re-enlist in the Army. And you know, the officer showing you the movie says, "Did you want that to happen to you? You know, go home, nobody's gonna like you, and you're not gonna be able to find a job or anything." It's okay with me. It's okay with me. I'll take my chances on the outside. So I got discharged in January 6th. They gave me 1 day to travel home. I joined on January 7th. They gave you a travel day, so I got out on January 6th, 1967. And I went home and was lonely. You know, after being around, you know, people for 3 years and so forth, and you know, it was weird being home again.
Yeah.
You know, it was real weird. And then I just started civilian life, and I went to, you know, started working and went to file for unemployment, because you could collect unemployment. Believe it or not, once you got out of the service. And then went to file unemployment. They made me go to the job center, and in the job center they found me a job working as a shipping and receiving clerk. That's why I went to work, making $2 an hour.
Wow.
And I thought that was pretty good pay. And then I got a raise, big deal. I got a wonderful raise. I got a dime raise.
Oh.
They gave me $2.10 an hour after about 6 months of working.
Wow.
But did some crazy stuff. Some crazy stuff. As a military, on the good side, like I said, it did teach me discipline. It did teach me goal, you know, as far as being goal oriented. I would recommend the draft for anybody right now. You know, I just feel that you know, people should go in the military or go some type of public service, you know, just to get that discipline, to get that taste of it, to see what everybody else goes through. Not out of I did it, so therefore you should do it, but more from a perspective that I just feel that it'd be good for the nation. Be good for the nation.
One question, was there, if any, combat in Korea?
Yeah, there was a little bit. We had in July and August, when I was going way before, it was rain, and there's nothing but hills, and there was a stream going along the side, and the barbed wire fence and the concertina wire and a watchtower, a guard tower, and it's raining like crazy. And I remember we were in the barracks, and the sergeant comes running in and says, "We need 10 volunteers." The Koreans had broken through the fence and were coming out to the compound. And what happened is the compound flooded. Not the compound, but the compound was on the side of the hill. The village was on the bottom of the hill. The village is flooded.
Okay.
There was about 6 feet of water in the village,
Wow.
and the stream became a huge stream.
Wow.
It became a river. You got flash floods. After it rains for about 3 or 4 days solid, there's nowhere for the water to go, so it just flash floods down,
Oh my goodness.
into the village. And every year the village floods.
Wow.
And you can see on the water lines, inside the hooches, where the water was from the previous year. And the village flooded, and we had a riot. And we had the rifles and bayonets, and we had a Korean standing across from me that was with a pickaxe, and he tried to kill me with a pickaxe.
Oh my gosh.
He's swinging a pickaxe at me,
Oh.
and I had a bayonet, and I stabbed him with a bayonet.
Yikes.
And that was the end of that.
Yep.
And then they all pulled back, from the riot, broke it up and pulled back, and we went about our business.
Wow.
So that was the only one other than people taking pot shots at me.
What was the best part of your service?
The camaraderie, the comrade, making friends, being in the same boat. Like in civilian life, you can be working for the same company, have the same job, and be paid different pay. Where in military, no matter what, if your rank is an E5 or whatever, an E4 or whatever you happen to be, everybody gets paid the same.
Right.
Everybody gets paid the same, and you also have a ranking that you can make the next rank, and you know how long it's going to take you to make the next rank.
Right.
And so I like that too. The fact that there was promotions, and like I say, teaching me discipline, teaching me. I matured in the military. I was pretty wild. I grew up in the east side of Cleveland. I grew up in the high rent district. In fact, I can only say when we first came to the United States, we were so poor. I had a black and white radio. And so we didn't, we had nothing. And my brothers are both graduates from college. Both of them had master's degrees. So we were all goal-oriented, and I think the military had a lot to do with that. We didn't settle for life and struggle. We struggled in the military, struggled for life, and I really believe firmly that people that struggle are better suited for civilian life. Because you're used to struggling and going after things and not having them handed to you. And I don't mean to imply that because you have things handed to you that you can't struggle or you can't fight for things. But I learned to fight for things, and the military was just a carryover of that. And I struggled for everything I got, and as a result, I thought I was pretty successful in civilian life. I made good money. I was a sales rep. I was one of the top sales reps for a couple of companies I worked for. Put my kids through college. My son went to NYU. My daughter went to Syracuse, and all my money went to both of them. I just have a bumper sticker that said my son goes to NYU, and so does all my money. But so I think the comradeship, the learning, the discipline, that was the best part of the military. The best part of the military. Everybody was in the same boat. Everybody was in the same boat, and everybody took their turn on guard duty, KP, patrols, walking point. Everybody took it, and then we used to have a saying: when you start bitching in the military, take your TS card and go see the chaplain, and he'll punch it for you.
Yeah.
And the TS card stood for tough shit card.
Yeah.
So the chaplain will punch your card for you, and then the other saying is, when a guy would start bitching about, why am I walking point again? I just walked point, not, 2 days ago. Why am I walking again? I go, you know what? And I carry this over in civilian life. I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you, but better you than me. Better you than me. I don't want to be doing it.
Yeah.
But I feel very sorry for you.
Yeah.
But better you than me.
And then one last question. I know you mentioned that you were at Kent State for...
Oh, yeah. During the shooting, I was playing rugby, and I came back Friday night from Colgate University, where we had a rugby game, Saturday night actually. We had the game Saturday. And pulling into Kent State, the police had blocked off the street. You couldn't get in. And I had an apartment, off campus. I lived off campus. I had an apartment, and we took the back roads and got back in. We had no idea that there was any problem. And then when we got into Kent, we found out that they burned down the ROTC building. There was an old wooden barracks that somehow got caught on fire and got burned down, and that's what started everything.
Okay.
And Sunday, near my apartment, the National Guard was bivouacked, and I made about 20 beer runs for the National Guard buying them beer. I went to a place called the Black Horse Saloon, which is off of Route 5 outside of Stowe, and you only could buy 3-2 beer on Sunday. You couldn't buy regular beer. They had 3-2 beer, which you had to be 18 to drink, and then the regular beer you had to be 21.
Right.
So on Sunday you could only buy 3-2 beer. So I bought cases and cases and cases of beer for the National Guard. Not on my own money. They'd give me $10. I'd go run out and get a case, and give me $10. I'd get another case to come back, and so it was a picnic. Sunday was a picnic. Everybody was having a ball. The girls are, flirting with the GIs. The GIs are flirting with the girls, and I'm talking to them, being a veteran, and just having a ball, drinking beer with them. It was just a ball. And then Monday morning, it just seemed different. Just the atmosphere seemed different. And there was going to be a demonstration on Monday morning. And I was in class till 10 o'clock, and I went out of class. I went back to the Student Union, which was right next to the burnout ROTC building, and there was guards standing around the burnout ROTC building, National Guard, the guards, and I had my old Army field jacket on, so I started chatting, and I had my books. I started chatting with one National Guard guy, and he had an M1 rifle. An M1 rifle was designed for 200 yards fighting, like an M16 nowadays is closer. M1 was 200 yards. And the reason I mention that is because some of the kids that got hit were 200 yards away. And anyway, so it's powerful. And I'm talking to him, and I said, you got an M1? I had an M1 in basic. He said, yeah. And I says, it's for the helmet. Is your weapon loaded? And he goes, you're goddamn right it is. And he pulls down the breech to show me that it's loaded. And I said, you're shitting me. You guys are walking around campus with loaded weapons? He said, yeah. And I said, you got to be kidding me. So I went over and told the other veterans, my buddies, these guys had loaded weapons, which we were really surprised.
Yeah.
We were shocked that they had loaded weapons. Like that riot I told you about in Korea, we didn't have loaded weapons.
Wow.
Even in that we didn't. You had ammo, but you didn't load it until you were told to load.
Wow.
And even on patrols, you didn't load until you were told to load.
Wow. And
stuff. So anyway, so we were just shocked that these guys had loaded weapons. So the demonstration was a V-like. There was a road and another road, and the demonstration was in the middle of this V. National Guard was on the bottom, and on the sides were thousands of people watching. They weren't participating in the demonstration, they were just watching the demonstration. And the National Guard was down here, and the 500 people here, so come around 11 o'clock or so, they started ringing the Liberty Bell. They had a bell there. And the National Guard had its orders to break up the demonstration, not to allow any demonstration to take place, which I think was wrong. You basically let a demonstration go through, and then when it's over with, everybody goes home. So anyway, so they come out, and I kind of kiddingly say it was like the Cowboys and Indians in the old Cowboy and Indian movie, where the Indians are off the reservation, and they got their spears and bows and arrows, and the cavalry comes running by and going, you have to get back to the reservation, and the Indians go, and you get back, and then if you don't get back to the reservation, we'll force you back. So the military came out in a Jeep, and they're running, riding in front of the demonstration, the demonstrators saying, this is an illegal demonstration, you have to break it up. If you don't break it up, we'll break it up. And everybody's, you know, giving them the finger and, you know, yelling back at them, go home, leave the campus. Basically the stuff like get out of Cambodia, leave the campus, we don't need you here. And all the spectators, again, thousands of spectators. And while I'm a spectator, I'm by the National Guard units, and we start arguing amongst ourselves, the veterans, whether we should be in Vietnam or not. Because some were pro and some were anti. And this one soldier lowered his shotgun, and he's gonna fire into our crowd. And we went, whoa, you know, raised our hands, said, hey, whoa, guy, take it easy. You know, and an officer came by and hit him on the head with a little stick that he was carrying on a helmet and pulled him out of line and said, you know, we heard him say that you know, you're too nervous to be in line. So he pulled him out. So these guys were tense. These guys were very tense, very anxious. And so the National Guard is running back and forth saying, break this up, break this up. So they don't. So a group of about 20 National Guard guys with gas masks come out with the rifles and bayonets, and they start firing tear gas into the crowd. So the crowd, some of the people picked up the tear gas canisters and threw them back. You know, you can't throw it very far. You know, 10 feet, 20 feet maximum.
They're heavy.
You know, heavy, and you just can't throw it. And you know, there's gas, but you know, big deal. It's a windy day. Gas isn't doing anything effective. So the National Guard starts coming towards the group of demonstrators, so the group of demonstrators backs up, and they go up on top of the hill. National Guard comes back down, the demonstrators all come back down, and they keep the demonstration going. So now the National Guard comes back up, takes them up over the hill, and then disperses them down to the left like, and I'm standing up here on the right behind the National Guard. I wasn't going to be in front of these guys,
Heck
you know,
no.
knowing they had loaded weapons. So I'm standing behind them. And class just let out, and there was by the engineering building was a major walkway between classes. You know how you go to classes, you go from one building to another, and classes just let out, and the National Guard got down in the firing position, and I figured, you know, they're not going to fire, and they got down in the firing position again. They started backing up, and they got back down, and they fired, and I just couldn't believe it. You know, saw kids get hit. And then one guy come walking down the hill wearing a suede jacket, and kids were running behind him yelling, stop him, he just shot someone, stop him, he just shot someone. And then he went into the National Guard line and showed him some credentials or something, and they let him in. And it turns out that, you know, years later I read in the paper that he was a kind of like an informant, and he had a pistol on him, and the speculation is that he fired the first shot, and or that he's pulled a pistol out, and a group of kids surrounded him, and you know he was, and the pistol was taken away from him by the sheriff when he got into the line, and the sheriff claims, you know, that it wasn't fired, and at that time he said it was fired or something like that. So there was speculation that this guy fired the first shot.
Wow.
He fired a couple of shots.
I never heard that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So, but I still remember seeing him walk down the hill and people running after him, chasing him, you know, and saying, stop him, you know, he just shot someone. Now, I don't think he shot anybody. I think he fired into the ground or something like that. But they, you know, this is buried. This is all buried about this guy.
Yeah.
And he ended up working for the FBI or something, you know, later in life, and then he was thrown out because of disciplinary reasons,
Wow.
you know, from the FBI and Sheriff's Department or something like that.
Wow.
He was thrown out. And then they basically came down and said after the shootings, you know, disperse. You know, everything's over, guys, you know, go home. And everybody basically did. They dispersed and went home. And I went home, and my friends, you know, it was really unfortunate. My friends knew I was a veteran, and yeah, I'm Lithuanian, like I was telling you earlier, so I used to go to the Lithuanian club where my buddies hung out, and they also knew that I went to Kent State, and you know, they heard about the shooting, and a bunch of them, the first thing they said was they should have shot more of them.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the attitude. The attitude is they should have shot more of them.
Yikes.
Yeah, instead of, you know, it's too bad, it shouldn't have happened. But a lot of people's attitudes, they should have shot more of them.
Wow.
So I ended up having to take another quarter because it was 3/4 of the way through the quarter, And you could either take the grade that you had or finish up at home somehow, I don't know how, but take tests at home, or drop the course and take it over again, depending on if the professor thought, the material coming up was important enough to take the course over. So I ended up having to take 2 courses over. And so I had to go back for another semester, another quarter. But that was all right with me because I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
I didn't, and I used to meet people and I'd say to them, they're taking extra credit hours and stuff like that, and they'd go, why are you doing that? Well, I want to get out of college. I want to get through college in 3 years. I go, what for? You got the rest of your life to work.
Right.
Why are you hurrying to get into work?
Right.
And then I'd meet girls, I'd be talking to them, and, we'd be talking about, getting married. Not that we're getting married, but, we talked about families there in Vietnam era, and, they would be saying, well, now's not a good time to have kids. And I want to have kids. And I said, why not? Now's not a good time to have kids. I said, when was a good time?
Yeah.
When Genghis Khan was ravaging all of Europe, the Black Plague, the Spanish Inquisition, the First World War, the Second World War. Right. When was a good time? The Civil War. You tell me when the Black Plague. You tell me when was a good time to have kids. There's no such thing as a good time to have kids. You either have or you don't. You deal with the times. Right. And so I think that's the other thing the military dealt with me is training is I deal with things. I don't procrastinate per se. If there's issues, I deal with them, and I also get through whatever issues are there. I don't let an obstacle get in my way. I basically make sure that I get through that obstacle, whatever it happens to be. Like going to graduate school, that was my goal, ultimate goal, and I made it. And even now, in sales, guys, the computer wouldn't work, so my partner says, well, we can't do the demo, because the computer doesn't work or the software doesn't work. And I said, no, we'll do a chalk talk. Right. We'll go to the blackboard and we'll draw the screens. Right. We'll show the process, how you move through the system and so forth. But we're not going to, we come all the way out here, we're not going to just give up. Right. And, a lot of people would just give up. They hit that wall and they just stop. Well, I learned to hit that wall and either go around it or go through it. Yeah. But to keep going, not to let it stop. And that's it. Any other questions?
Well, I don't have any other questions at this point in
Sue, anything?
But if there's anything else you would want to add too.
Just Vietnam was happening, conflict, war.
Right.
What was going on in Korea?
And
Did
Korea
they have
was
to send the army over there?
Well, in Korea we were stationed permanently there. There was 40,000 troops stationed along the DMZ in Korea, because the Korean War. A lot of people don't realize this, but the Korean War is still on. There's no end to the war. There's a ceasefire that's in place right now. Yeah. So at that time, which was 10 years after the ceasefire took effect, there was a lot of infiltrators coming into South Korea from North Korea, and there were a lot of, they used to send balloons over, and the balloons would have propaganda that explodes and stuff like that. So there was a lot of activity along the DMZ and close to the DMZ. Not so much combat, but there was a lot of propaganda activity and infiltrators, and then, so the war was still on. It was very tense. It was very anxious. In fact, you were anxious all the time. You were anxious all the time. Filled with a lot of anxiety, not knowing what's, going to happen. In fact, we had one inspection one day when an officer came by, and we had this guy by the name of Jimmy Smith, a big guy, had a real dark, deep laugh, and the officer had an inspection, and the officer comes up to Jimmy Smith and he says, young officer, new guy, he says, Jimmy, what would you, Mr. Smith, because you have your name, Smith, what would you do if the North Koreans came across the DMZ right now? And Smith said, well, I'd head to Seoul as fast as I can go. And he'd go, the officer says, why are you going to go to Seoul? Because Seoul's going to be the first place they're going to attack. And Jimmy said, well, I got to get to Seoul to get to the ocean. And then I'm jumping in it, and I'm swimming home. Because I'll be damned if I'm going to die. And that was kind of the attitude, I'll be damned if I'm going to die for, the Koreans. And everybody's laughing, the officers, he's trying to be serious. Guys coming in drunk and a skunk in the middle of the night from the village. you know, that was the other big thing, was the military did whatever it could to discourage you from marrying one of the Koreans. And they put all kinds of obstacles in your way. And like I said, the only people you met, as far as the women, were prostitutes. You didn't meet anyone that wasn't. And the guys would come in and they'd fall in love. They'd be in love. And the joke was, I know she's different. She's different. And the guys would always say, well, she's different, you know. You don't understand, she's different. Yeah, right, she's different. You know? She doesn't want a ticket to the United States. But some of the guys would fall in love, and then some of the guys, you know, would if you didn't drink before you went there, you drank before you left.
Yeah.
You know, it was, you smoked before you went into the basic. If you didn't smoke before basic, you smoked after. You know, because everybody smoked, everybody drank. That's the only way you kept your sanity. And so that was what's going on in Korea at that time. So it was patrols and guard duty, constant. And they told us, don't shoot anybody just because they're stealing a little bit of the fence. You know, because they would steal anything that was metal. Anything that was metal, metal was precious.
Wow.
And they would steal anything that was metal.
Wow.
They'd cut sections of the fence out if they could. And that's it, that's my story.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, I hope it was entertaining.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yes.